202. Two emperors taken captive. Due to the resolute resistance of the people and military in Dongjing, Kaifeng, the Jin general Zong was forced to retreat. General Zhong Shidao advised Emperor Qinzong of Song to launch an attack while the Jin army was crossing the Yellow River during their retreat, aiming to annihilate them. This was a sound military strategy. However, not only did Emperor Qinzong refuse the proposal, but he also dismissed Zhong Shidao from his position. After the Jin army withdrew, Emperor Qinzong and his ministers foolishly believed that they could now live in peace. They even brought back the former emperor, Huizong, to Dongjing. Li Gang repeatedly warned Qinzong that military defenses needed to be strengthened to prevent another invasion, but his proposals were always obstructed by the pro-surrender faction. Emperor Qinzong himself grew tired of Li Gang's persistent warnings. Little did they expect that while Zhonghuang's eastern army had retreated, Zhonghan's western army was still pressing forward and intensifying its siege on Taiyuan. Qinzong sent General Zhong Shizhong to reinforce the city, but he was ambushed en route by the Jin forces and perished in battle. The surrenderists, eager to remove Li Gang from the capital, persuaded Qinzong to send him to Hebei to take charge of the war effort. Many righteous officials opposed Li Gang's reassignment, arguing that this was the worst possible time for him to leave the capital. However, Qinzong was determined to send him away. Li Gang knew he was being sidelined, but he would not refuse an order to fight the Jin on the front lines. Qinzong assigned him 12,000 soldiers. Li Gang requested 1 million taels of silver, 1 million bolts of silk, and 1 million coins in military funds, but the court only provided 200,000. When Li Gang attempted to make adequate preparations before leaving, Qinzong accused him of stalling and repeatedly urged him to set out. Left with no choice, Li Gang hurriedly led his troops to battle. Upon arriving in Heian, Li Gang began recruiting more soldiers and repairing weapons. However, the court ordered him to disband his newly recruited forces and march directly to Taiyuan. With limited troops at his command, Li Gang devised a three-pronged attack strategy, but the local commanders, who reported directly to the imperial court, refused to follow his orders. Without unified command, the campaign ended in a disastrous defeat. Though he was nominally the commander, Li Gang had no real authority. Frustrated, he submitted his resignation. The surrenderist faction seized the opportunity to accuse him, saying that despite his insistence on war, he had only led the army to failure. Emperor Qinzong dismissed him from office and exiled him to the south. The rulers of the Jin dynasty had always feared Li Gang. Now that he had been removed, they no longer had any reservations. Emperor Taizong of Jin ordered Zhonghan and Zhonghuang to launch another attack on Dongjing. At this time, the city of Taiyuan had been under siege by Zhonghan's western army for 8 months. The defending general, Wang Bing, led the soldiers and civilians in a desperate resistance. The Jin forces tried every possible method to breach the city but were repelled time and again. As supplies dwindled, the defenders resorted to slaughtering horses and mules for food. Once those were gone, they boiled the leather from their bows to sustain themselves. Civilians survived on wild grass and chaff, yet not a single person surrendered. Eventually, the Jin army breached the city. Wang Bing and his starving troops fought the enemy in the streets until the last moment. In the end, Wang Bing threw himself into the Fun River, choosing death over capture. With Taiyuan fallen, both Jin armies advanced southward. Upon hearing that Dongjing was in imminent danger, Song generals from various regions voluntarily led their troops to its aid. However, Emperor Qinzong and his surrenderist ministers were preoccupied with peace negotiations. Instead of reinforcing the capital, they ordered all incoming troops to return to their original posts. At this time, the Song army still had 120,000 infantry and 10,000 cavalry stationed on the southern bank of the Yellow River. Zhonghan's western army reached the northern bank but hesitated to force a crossing. That night, the Jin forces feigned an assault by beating war drums throughout the night. Hearing the drums, the Song soldiers on the southern bank panicked, believing that a major attack was imminent. In their terror, they abandoned their camps and fled. In a single night, all 130,000 soldiers had scattered. Without resistance, Zong Han's forces easily crossed the river. Meanwhile, Zong Wan's eastern army captured Daming, modern-day Daming, Hebei, and also crossed the Yellow River, pressing southward. The two Jin armies closed in on Dongjing, throwing Emperor Qinzong into a state of shock. The surrenderist ministers repeatedly whispered in his ear, insisting that seeking peace was the only way to survive. Helpless, Qinzong sent his younger brother, Prince Kang, Zhao Go, to negotiate with Zongwang. As Zhao Go passed through Cizhou, modern-day Xixian, Hebei, the local governor, Zong Zhe, warned him, "The Jin merely want to lure your highness into their camp. Their forces are already at our gates. What good will peace talks do?" The people of Cizhou also surrounded Zhao Go's horse, preventing him from leaving for the Jin camp. Afraid of being taken hostage, Zhao Go chose to stay behind in Xiangzhou, modern-day Anyang, Hunan, instead of proceeding. Before long, both Jin armies arrived at Dongjing and launched a fierce assault. The city had only 30,000 imperial guards left, and they were already in disarray, with more than half having deserted. Because the imperial court had ordered reinforcements to withdraw, no reinforcements arrived. By the time Qinzong regretted dismissing Li Gang, it was too late. Desperate and helpless, the emperor turned to a notorious fraudster named Guojing, who boasted of his magic arts. He claimed that with exactly 7,779 divine soldiers, he could capture the Jin generals and drive away the enemy. Some court officials, grasping at straws, actually placed their faith in him. Guojing gathered a group of ruffians and criminals to act as his so-called divine army. When the Jin forces stormed the city, Guojing's divine soldiers were instantly overwhelmed and scattered. Dongjing fell to the invaders. Facing his downfall, Emperor Qinzong wept bitterly but had no choice. Accompanied by a few ministers, he personally carried a letter of surrender to the Jin camp, begging for peace. Zonghan demanded that Qinzong cede all of Hedong and Hebei to the Jin and pay a massive ransom. 10 million taels of gold. 20 million taels of silver. 10 million bolts of silk. Qinzong agreed to all terms, and the Jin generals allowed him to return to the city. Once back in Dongjing, Qinzong ruthlessly extorted gold and silver from the citizens to fulfill the ransom. However, the Jin generals grew impatient with his delays. Before long, they summoned Qinzong back to the Jin camp and detained him, declaring that he would only be released once the ransom was fully paid. Qinzong then assigned 24 officials to assist the Jin army in conducting house-to-house raids among the imperial family, nobles, officials, monks, and Taoist priests. For over 20 days, they looted an unimaginable amount of gold, silver, treasures, rare antiques, and even the nation's official maps and archives. In April of the year 1127, the Jin generals Zonghan and Zongwang, leading their victorious army, took Emperor Huizong, Emperor Qinzong, along with over 2,000 members of the imperial family and court officials, as captives to the north. Laden with stolen riches, they returned triumphantly. Thus, after 167 years of rule since its founding by Zhao Kuan-yin, the Northern Song dynasty came to an end. 203. Zong Zhe's 3 calls to cross the river. After the fall of the Northern Song dynasty, Prince Kang, Zhao Go, who had remained in Xiangzhou, fled to Nanjing, modern Shanqiu, Hunan. In May 1127, he ascended the throne in Nanjing as Emperor Gaozong of Song. This new Song dynasty, which later established its capital in Linan, modern Hangzhou, Zhujiang, became known in history as the Southern Song. Upon ascending the throne, Emperor Gaozong, pressured by public opinion, was forced to recall Li Gang and appoint him as the chancellor. However, in reality, the emperor placed his trust in his 2 close associates, Huang Qianshan and Wang Boyan. Li Gang proposed numerous strategies for resisting the Jin. He also advised Emperor Gaozong, if we are to recover Dongjing, Kaifeng, we must use Zong Zhe. Zong Zhe was a staunch anti-Jin general. Before the fall of the Northern Song, Emperor Qinzong had once sent him as an envoy to the Jin capital for peace negotiations. Zong Zhe had declared, "I do not expect to return alive from this mission." If the Jin agree to withdraw, that would be best, otherwise, I will fight them to the end. I would rather lose my head than let my country suffer humiliation. Fearing that Zong Zai's strong stance would hinder peace talks, Emperor Qinzong dismissed him from the diplomatic mission and reassigned him as a local official in Suzhou. During the second Jin invasion of Dongjing, Zong Zai led his troops to battle and won 13 consecutive victories, putting the Song forces in a favorable position. He wrote to Prince Kang, Zhao Go, urging him to gather generals and march to Dongjing. He also sent letters to 3 other generals, calling for a coordinated rescue effort. However, these generals not only refused to send troops but mocked Zong Zai as a madman. Left without support, Zong Zai had to fight alone. On one occasion, his outnumbered troops were surrounded by a Jin army 10 times their size. Zong Zai told his soldiers, "Advancing means death, retreating means death. Our only option is to fight our way through." Inspired by his determination, the soldiers fought with extraordinary courage and managed to break through the Jin encirclement. Emperor Gaozong was well aware of Zong Zai's bravery. Following Li Gang's recommendation, he appointed Zong Zai as the governor of Kaifeng. At that time, although the Jin forces had retreated from Kaifeng, the city had been devastated by 2 major battles. The walls lay in ruins, civilians and soldiers were living in chaotic conditions, and the city's proximity to the Yellow River meant that Jin troops frequently roamed the northern banks. Fear and disorder spread throughout Kaifeng. Zong Zai was highly respected by both soldiers and civilians. Upon his arrival in the city, his first act was to issue a strict order: anyone caught looting civilian property will be severely punished according to military law. Despite this decree, a few incidents of robbery occurred. Zong Zai promptly executed the offenders, and the city gradually regained order. The people of Hebei, unable to endure the Jin army's plundering and massacres, formed resistance militias to fight back. Li Gang strongly advocated for relying on these militias to build a new anti-Jin army. After arriving in Kaifeng, Zong Zai actively coordinated with the resistance forces. Upon hearing of his reputation, many militia leaders voluntarily placed themselves under his command. In Hedong, a militia leader named Wang Shan had gathered an army of 700,000 and planned to attack Kaifeng. When Zong Zai learned of this, he personally rode alone to meet Wang Shan. With tears in his eyes, Zong Zai pleaded, "The country is in peril. If we had a few more heroes like you, united in our cause, would the Jin dare to invade us?" Moved by his words, Wang Shan also wept and declared, "I will follow your command." Other militia leaders such as Yang Jin, Wang Zixing, Li Gui, and Wang Dalong also commanded forces ranging from tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands. Zong Zai dispatched envoys to persuade them to unite against the Jin. As a result, Kaifeng's outer defenses were strengthened, its citizens regained confidence, food supplies became ample, and market prices stabilized, restoring order after years of chaos. However, just as Zong Zai was preparing to lead an offensive to reclaim the Central Plains, Emperor Gaozong and his advisors, Huang Qianshan and Wang Boyan, deemed Nanjing unsafe and planned another retreat further south. When Li Gang opposed the move, he was dismissed from office. Zong Zai, deeply anxious, personally crossed the Yellow River to meet with resistance leaders in Hebei, urging them to join forces against the Jin. In Kaifeng, he constructed 24 fortresses, established defensive camps along the Yellow River, and linked them closely together in a pattern known as linked pearl fortifications. With support from resistance forces across Hedong and Hebei, the Song defensive position grew increasingly formidable. Zong Zai repeatedly submitted memorials urging Emperor Gaozong to return to Kaifeng and lead the resistance himself. However, the memorials were intercepted by Huang Qianshan and Wang Boyan, who dismissed Zong Zai as a fanatic. Before long, Emperor Gaozong fled from Nanjing to Yangzhou. As Zong Zai had predicted, the Jin soon launched another major offensive. Emperor Taizong of Jin dispatched the general Wu Zhu, also known as Zongbi, to attack Kaifeng. Anticipating this, Zong Zai stationed troops in Luoyang and Zhengzhou. When Wuju's forces neared Kaifeng, Zong sent thousands of elite troops to cut off their retreat, then launched a two-pronged ambush, forcing Wuju into a humiliating retreat. On another occasion, the Jin general Zong occupied Luoyang. Zong sent his commanders Guo Jinmin and Li Jingliang to launch a counterattack, but they were defeated. Guo Jinmin surrendered to the Jin, while Li Jingliang fled in fear of punishment. Zong captured Li Jingliang and scolded him. Losing a battle can be forgiven, but desertion is insubordination. He then ordered Li Jingliang's execution. Meanwhile, Guo Jinmin returned to Kaifeng with a Jin envoy, attempting to persuade Zong to surrender. On the government hall, Zong confronted Guo Jinmin. If you had died on the battlefield, you would at least be a loyal ghost. But instead, you chose treachery. How dare you show your face here? With that, he ordered Guo Jinmin's execution as well. Turning to the Jin envoy, Zong sneered, I am ready to fight to the death for this city. You, a Jin general, lack the courage to defeat me in battle and instead resort to trickery. How pathetic! Terrified, the Jin envoy turned pale. With a single command, Zong had him executed as well. By killing 3 men in succession, Zong demonstrated his unwavering resolve to resist the Jin. His defiance greatly boosted the morale of the Song army. Jin soldiers, both fearful and awed, referred to him respectfully as Grandfather Zong. With the support of Hebei militias, Zong stockpiled troops and supplies, believing that reclaiming the Central Plains was within reach. He submitted over 20 memorials urging Emperor Gaozong to return to Kaifeng, but none reached the emperor as they were all intercepted by Huang Qianshan and Wang Boyan. By this time, Zong was nearly 70 years old. The frustration of being ignored took a toll on his health, and he fell ill with a severe abscess on his back. When his officers visited him, he weakly opened his eyes and said, I have fallen ill because I cannot avenge my country's humiliation. As long as you continue fighting, I will die without regret. Hearing this, the officers were moved to tears. As they left, they heard Zong weakly recite a poem by the Tang poet Du Fu. Before success, the general dies, forever will heroes shed their tears. With his last breath, he gathered all his remaining strength and cried out 3 times. Cross the river! Cross the river! Cross the river! Then he closed his eyes for the final time. When the people of Kaifeng heard of Zong's passing, they wept bitterly. After his death, the Song court appointed Du Chong as the military governor of Dongjing. However, Du Chong was an incompetent and cruel leader. Upon arriving in Kaifeng, he dismantled all of Zong's defensive preparations. Before long, the Central Plains once again fell into Jin hands.